This is big breaking news. Stores like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot are now holding urgent meetings with the Trump White House. Just today, Monday, April 21st, they held a meeting, and these retailers are worried. We're also seeing suspension of mail and certain goods coming from China as well too. Certain deliveries and goods have been suspended. So let's get into all the details here really quick, guys. Please just hit that like and hit that subscribe. I'm posting every day, keeping you guys updated on this big news, and it just helps to get these alerts out. I appreciate that. So right now, today, we had a meeting taking place between the Trump White House and Trump himself, and stores like Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart. It says here that Target says the meeting was to discuss a path forward on trade. It says here that U.S. President Donald Trump met with major retailers, including Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Target on Monday to discuss broad-based tariffs likely to raise the cost of everyday goods that they import. It says big U.S. chains like Walmart and Target rely heavily on imported goods, and tariffs, including the 145% levies on China, are expected to add strain to their prices. All right. It says here, quote, "We had a productive meeting with President Trump and his team and appreciated the opportunity to share our insights." That's what Walmart spokesperson said in a statement, and they did not elaborate much further. It says this marks Walmart CEO's first meeting with Doug McMillan, since the introduction of the president's, quote, Liberation Day tariffs. Earlier in April, McMillan said the two had not personally discussed tariffs, although other members of Walmart's leadership had been in regular contact with his administration. So they are meeting with the president to figure out exactly what they can do to minimize these tariffs. These companies actually have been stockpiling the past 6 months because they knew these tariffs were coming as soon as Trump got elected, and they've actually been adjusting their stockpiles and adjusting their inventories to stock up on a lot of these things before the tariffs went into place. So they are most likely going to be okay, at least for a few months, but these stockpiles are going to dwindle, and then eventually they're going to have to raise prices on these things as the supply gets lower, and they're going to have to bring in new products that are now subjected to the tariffs. All right, that's been Walmart's main strategy to avoid these tariffs, and they've been hoping that there is some type of negotiation or trade deal that is made in the next month or two, the next few months, before they have to start buying more inventories from places like China and overseas that will be subjected to the tariffs and potentially raise their prices, right? Amazon has also suspended certain deliveries on certain products. So a lot of Amazon deliveries are just stored in massive warehouses. A lot of times they're relatively close to you, within a couple hours of wherever you live. And they keep these warehouses stocked full, and a lot of it comes from China, right? Almost a lot of it does. Almost everything does, especially on Amazon and places like Walmart. And they have suspended orders and shipments of certain products that are going to be disrupted from these tariffs, mostly certain electronics and certain things like computers, chips, phones, things like that. Certain brands are being suspended from Amazon as well too. So could be affected your orders and shipments. And it says here that more than half of all Walmart and Target imports are from China. And it says Lowe's and Home Depot also import significant amounts, right? They didn't say exactly the percentage, but more than half has been imported from Walmart. And it says Walmart shares are up 2% in 2025, while others have all posted double-digit losses. Target has been hit hardest, down 32% so far this year, right? And there was a little bit of a dip in the stock market because Trump wants to get rid of the Fed Chairman Powell, who does not want to lower interest rates, right? Europe has lowered interest rates consistently the past couple cycles. They keep lowering it, and the United States has not lowered our base interest rates for the Fed in a long time, right? In years at this point, it hasn't gone down. And Trump thinks that these things should be brought down, and most likely they should. They're saying, hey, there's a slowdown. There's, the slowdown of the supply chain, stock market's going down, things like that. So shouldn't interest rates go down with it, right? I think this is part of Trump's strategy. I think he kind of wanted to slow things down and bring interest rates down to make lending a little more affordable, make homes a little more affordable for people, and to allow money to flow a little bit easier, right? So that also caused a disruption in the stock market today, but it's one of these things you can't just watch it day to day. It's going to fluctuate, it's going to go up and down, and the gains will probably be right back. So whenever you see these dips, honestly, I'm not giving you any stock advice or anything like that. I don't even participate in this really, all right? But I would buy low, right? If you're really watching these things day to day, maybe buy low when it does dip, because most likely in the next 24 to 48 hours from these dips, you're going to see some type of increase, right? And then within a week, it's going to be, no one's even going to remember it. Everyone's going to forget about it. So that's what typically happens here. And China has been responding to, saying that they will put pressure on any country that wants to make trade deals with the US that are not in China's best interest, right? So they're just trying to protect their interest. Makes sense, but the US is trying to protect our interest too. That's what this is all about. And other countries we're just putting retaliatory tariffs on. 90% of all the tariffs, besides the ones on China, were just retaliatory, where they already had tariffs on the US and we're just putting the same tariffs back that they had on us, right? So all it would take is for them to remove them, and Trump wants to remove them. That's the main thing he wants. He wants balance with trade and these trade surpluses as well too, where there is just, billions of dollars, maybe trillions, even hundreds of billions going to other countries every year, and they're not buying the same amount of goods from us, right? So there's also been suspension of deliveries from companies like Ford. They have suspended deliveries of Ford trucks to China, right? And China is also talking about suspending deliveries of certain automobile companies as well too. And just yesterday, they actually rejected Boeing jets that were intended for a Chinese airliner, right? So Boeing made multiple different aircrafts that were on the way to China to be delivered to Xiamen Airlines, and they made a request to return the planes and not buy them in the midst of this tariff war. All right, so we're seeing retaliation across the board. Companies are getting involved, and even now Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, they are getting involved too, and working with the president so they can figure out exactly what to do to minimize the impact, all right? And overall, part of the plan with these tariffs, I believe, is to reduce taxes, all right? I sure hope that's part of the plan. That's what we keep being told. And I think Trump wants to have these tariffs to offset the taxes that we have to pay. So if we can have, hundreds of billions coming in from tariffs every year, then we can potentially lower taxes for the American citizen and offset these things, and then it becomes like a voluntary tax, essentially, where You can buy these goods if you want to from China, but they might cost a little bit more because they have a tariff and you're paying a little bit of a tax on it, right? So it makes sense. A lot of this has been like overblown and acting like it's the end of the world when every other country, almost every other country on earth has tariffs on the United States. But then when we implement the same level of tariffs, all of a sudden it's a bad thing and everyone's panicking and freaking out, right? It's going to be okay, right? There's going to be some bumpy roads here, but I think Trump is trying to have these things reset, right? Because we've been on a trajectory where we've been losing our manufacturing. We've been losing our production capabilities. Even for our military, we're losing these capabilities. It's a national security risk to send all our manufacturing overseas. And look at what's happening now too. It's being used as leverage against us. So we send all of our manufacturing overseas, and then we buy these goods because they're just a little bit cheaper, because they're able to pay their employees a lot cheaper and not follow the labor laws. They're a lot more exploitive. But when it comes to things like this, when the heat's on, when the pressure's on, right? Imagine if there was some type of war between the United States and China. This manufacturing is being used as leverage by countries like China and other countries to say, hey, we have the leverage now for production and manufacturing, and we can cut you off, right? We can cut off certain goods to you as well too. It's a risk, and it's something that needs corrected in the long term. We don't have to produce every little thing, but there are a lot of things that at a base level we need to produce. Things like rare earth minerals, all right? China has a monopoly on rare earth mineral refining because countries all across the world will send their rare earth metals that are essentially, they're just in a mass of other things, all right? They have to be refined. So there's a small amount of rare earth metals and minerals in a massive amount of like silt and sand, dirt, rocks, things like this from mining. And China has been one of the only countries to heavily invest in these refining facilities. So countries all over the world will send their material to China to be refined into these rare earth metals, right, and minerals, and they don't have the refining capability in most developed countries, right? So China, and then once China sends these things back out, they put control restrictions on them, right? They decide, all right, this can't be sent to the US, right? They just did a ban on these certain rare earth minerals just last week going to the US, which could affect the US military. It could affect things like radar and night vision and our GPS navigation systems. Things like that need these rare earth minerals, and we don't have the refining capability in the US anymore, and most Western countries don't have this at all, right? So, and now they're using it as leverage. They're saying, hey, all right, now we're not going to export anymore, or we're going to have heavily restricted exports on these certain rare earth minerals, and they can do that now because they have a lock on the market. They have a monopoly on this refining for it. So something that's just, we need to have these things domestically. It doesn't even matter if it's not like super profitable or something like that. It's just a national security risk for a country that we need these things domestically so we cannot be cut off, right? In the event of a war, in the event of a trade war or a kinetic war between our militaries too. This could happen. Hopefully it doesn't, but these things could happen, all right? So there's lots of retaliations going on. We're also seeing suspension of mail coming from places like Hong Kong, right? So the Hong Kong Post, which is the post office there, which is like the main post office where goods come from China to the US, because Hong Kong is kind of like a economic zone. So it's technically in China, but it's technically like not part of China. It's this weird economic zone where they allow a lot of international trade to happen without as many restrictions. Okay, so they ship a lot of things out of Hong Kong, and they've even suspended packages coming to the US, right? So even if you're, you know, whatever, Amazon or Temu or whatever the heck you're ordering off says, okay, we're shipping it here, the actual post office in Hong Kong might not send it out, right? They said they're still sending letters and paper mail, but they are no longer going to be delivering packages, okay? And we also have DHL, which is one of the biggest international package delivery companies. It was founded in San Francisco in California, DHL, and it's really big in Europe too and internationally. And they have suspended deliveries to the US worth more than $800 because of, quote, significant increase in red tape at customs following the new tariffs. It says the delivery giant said it will temporarily stop shipments from companies in all countries to American consumers on Monday, quote, until further notice, right? So they're saying they're stopping all of them from all countries to America, right? So not even just from China, any shipments to the US internationally are being halted. And they're saying if they cost more than $800. It says here that previously packages worth $2,500 could enter the US with minimal paperwork, but due to tighter custom checks, due to these tariffs, the threshold has been lowered. So expect more of these delays and potentially disruptions. Even a few months ago, the USPS suspended all deliveries coming from China. This was before the tariffs even went into place, and this only lasted a few days, the suspension. But these things can happen, right, at a moment's notice. And part of the reason these tariffs and these disruptions are even taking place, according to President Trump, he is saying that, quote, many shippers in China, quote, hide illicit substances and conceal the true contents of shipment sent to the US through deceptive shipping practices, right? So they're essentially saying that they think that China uses fake shipments sometimes to smuggle things, potentially like fentanyl and opioids, and maybe even worse than that, maybe even people, humans, things like that. It says under an executive order, the White House said the measures were aimed at, quote, addressing the synthetic opioid supply chain, which it said, quote, plays a significant role in the synthetic opioid crisis in the US. So Trump was insinuating that they're potentially shipping these things over here using the mail and using shipping containers as well too to send this stuff over here. And this does happen. They send base components even to places like Mexico too, to then produce it there and then bring it across the border and sell it in the US, right? And they sell a lot of these base components to make these things like fentanyl for very cheap, right? So that's also going on. Major problem in our shipping industry is all the weird stuff going on behind the scenes too. And I think Trump knows that, and I think that's kind of part of it too, is to say, hey, we know what else you're shipping around. We know there's other stuff in these containers too. We know there's something else going on. And if you don't make this right, we're going to expose exactly what's going on, what's in these shipping containers. We're going to start opening them up and showing people what's inside and what's going on. You remember all those protests for the portsmen All right, you remember all that a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago now, maybe even longer. Time's just been flying by. All right, it's already April. It's going to be May soon. And do you remember all that? All right, I think there was something else going on with that too. I don't think it was just about the money and the automation. I think there was something else going on too. And I think that could potentially be exposed as well too. I think that's part of the plan, and in the cards is to show what's actually being shipped across the world if this isn't made right. All right, so let me know what you guys think down below. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying prepared out there, and I hope you had a good Easter. I hope you have big blessings for your life, your family, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.